Abbott of USA Wrestling here for our Women's Wednesday feature. I'm going to speak with Veronica Carlson, who's a member of USA Wrestling's Executive Committee and Board and a leader with the Athletes Advisory Committee. So Veronica, do you remember what your last freestyle match was, where it was, how that all went for you? What kind of memories do you have looking back now?
My last competition was the 2016 Olympic trials, and obviously it didn't go my way because I didn't end up on the 2016 Olympic team. But I ended up getting injured 2 weeks prior, so the first time I was back on the mat since that injury was that morning when I was warming up for it. And so I just went out there and tried to give it my shot, and if there was a way it was going to happen, I was going to make it happen, but it just wasn't in the cards. So it's been long enough. I don't have residual feelings that attach me to that experience like I did before. I was bitter for a while, but yeah, I've kind of just redirected and moved on a little bit.
So at the time when you made decisions like, hey, I'm not going to be competing in senior wrestling anymore, did you really think you'd be this involved in USA Wrestling? Has been maybe in the last year or so?
No. So it's funny, I never made like the decisive action to say, I'm done competing completely. I just kind of removed myself from wrestling and the community, and I definitely needed a break. And I also, so the AAC and the leadership position that I was in for this past quad, it definitely was not as involving as it has become the past year. And but that's really the only thing that tied me to wrestling for a good portion of this last quad. And then as that became something that required more attention and outreach, and basically reintegrated myself into the community, I've kind of just rediscovered a lot of my connections and a lot of my, I don't know, wrestling's still my home, even though I took a little break from it.
Well, it's part of your wrestling home. Obviously, you had to have somehow gotten into this athlete leadership role. Is it something you sought, or were you nominated? Or, it's there's a process where the athletes select their leaders, right?
Right. I'm a very throw myself into everything that I can and try to take it all the way kind of person. And so I definitely was seeking out this position, and I wouldn't say there's normally as much opportunity to climb that ladder within the AAC as quickly as I did, but we had, just with the USOPC going through a lot of different changes, they ended up changing their definition and bylaws for, or maybe not changing it, but enforcing it more to where we had to be in compliance to a stricter standard than we were previously. So athletes that originally we thought were going to stay on the committee ended up terming out quicker than we thought. So originally I was put into an interim chair or leadership role, and then eventually the AAC, we voted, and so I became the chair after that.
Yeah, and
I don't know how to say it humbly.
Yeah, no, that's cool. But those leadership positions put you on the executive committee. They had you involved in a lot of different things. Were there certain things that either surprised you, or new things that you learned once you started going on all these different calls and doing your role as the athlete rep?
It completely changed my view of USA Wrestling. And USA Wrestling's interactions with the athletes. And then also it opened up my eyes to what avenues athletes can actually take that I wasn't aware of when I was competing. So I would definitely say that my initial drive to be on the AAC was to jump in and make all these changes so that things that happened during my career wouldn't happen to other athletes. But what I realize is there are a lot of different things put in place that athletes just aren't aware of, that can help mitigate situations that are unfavorable to athletes when they feel like they have a discrepancy in the procedures or anything like that. Athletes are an integral part of everything leading up to any decision within the organization. And that's not something that I think is common knowledge throughout the athlete body. So that was kind of the biggest eye opener for me. It took me a while to catch on to it and kind of learn the ropes. But I don't know, I see it as just a huge opportunity for the athletes to get more involved and realize the power that athletes have and the athlete voice has, because you know, we're a part of that voting mechanism. We have a voice within all of these decisions too. And I think reaching out and making athletes aware of that has been like, I don't know, it's just been really interesting to see like how this has grown for me. And I really want to transcend that and give that experience to other athletes too. I want everyone to know that they have a voice in this organization, and that if something goes wrong or if they have an idea to make things better on any front, then USA Wrestling and the AAC can be that bridge.
So, and you talked about being busy in the last couple months, and we know why some of those things happen. The sport got hit with the COVID-19 pandemic. The social justice issues came up in the world, and obviously wrestling is an active part of our world, especially here in the United States. You know, we've had to make decisions regarding how we're financially going to get through the tough times, and I mean, there's been a lot going on, but I mean, to me, the voice of the athletes have been getting stronger and clearer throughout this challenging time. What are your thoughts about why that happened, and just why it's important that the athletes have a strong voice in what's going on in wrestling?
So two parts to that question. I think a lot of things have compounded to bring the athlete voice more into the forefront. And that is kind of the growth and precipice of social media. That is athletes having other things to focus on other than training 3 times a day because COVID has affected them. That is athlete constituents who are a part of these minority communities realizing that their voice needs to be heard just as much as anybody else's, and wanting to be at the forefront. So there's a lot of things in a short amount of time that are allowing the athletes and giving them reason to rise. And then I think that the AAC and USA Wrestling has done a good job too in trying to incorporate the athlete voice. And I think that even just the few releases and stuff that we, the AAC, have put out has kind of given visibility to this connection to the athlete voice and being a part of USA Wrestling and offering that scope. Whereas before, maybe there wasn't that, that bridge to help facilitate that. The other thing is the national team calls, bringing people together and talking about things, you know, spanning the whole scope of whatever they're going through or how we should move forward. I just think there's a lot more opportunity that was taken advantage of because of COVID. And yeah, it's kind of given people a realization that they have a stronger presence in USA Wrestling on the administrative side than maybe they previously thought.
This is just a wrestling thing though, right? Veronica, I mean, the Olympic Committee's made a tremendous step forward in what they perceive as building more opportunity for the athlete's voice in the whole Olympic family. Why is that important? Why will that make the U.S. better at the Olympic movement, better at USA Wrestling?
So the USOPC and the Olympic movement is founded on athlete-centric principles. And when things like the Larry Nassar investigation, things like that rise up, it gives reason for people to consider the athlete voice and consider that they weren't listening to it all along. I think that's kind of the biggest thing that sparked this, I wouldn't say upheaval, but movement towards a more athlete-centric organization. And I don't know, the USOPC AAC has done an incredible job in reaching out to Congress and leadership, and basically receiving support outside of the organization to say that this is an important thing. Athletes need to be heard here. And a lot of sports, I mean, when we go, so Tony Ramos and Tony's the rep for our US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, Athlete Advisory Council, and then I'm the alternate rep. But these committees that we go to, it's very apparent that in other sports, this platform for athletes to speak out is not as, it's not as open as in USA Wrestling. And so this movement is definitely making sure that those athletes and NGBs and organizations are rising up and making sure their athletes are heard. A big thing is, instead of 20% representation on the boards for all of the NGB's committees, that's going to be moved up to 33% athlete representation in the next year. And really, it just makes sense. These decisions that are made in these organizations directly affect all athletes, and it's for the athlete. So why wouldn't the athlete voice be at the forefront of these decisions?
So we say the word athlete a lot here, and it's because you're an athlete, right? I mean, I want to talk about your athletic part of this in addition to your leadership part. How the heck did you get involved in wrestling?
Oh my gosh, I have to think back decades ago.
Well, wait. You're not that old. Come on.
No, I was the most energetic child and probably not the most behaved child, and I needed something to channel my energy. And for a long time, I was actively involved in a lot of different sports, but I was pulled to wrestling. So in 7th grade, 6th grade, I really wanted to join, but I grew up in Illinois. My parents were cautious around the issue and weren't really receptive of me joining. So I waited a year, was still adamant about it, ended up joining in 7th grade, and then kind of just committed myself from there. I fell in love from the first day doing stance and motion in a circle. And yeah, I had a similar story to a lot of girls in my generation with being the only girl on a boys wrestling team. But it was great for me. I constantly felt like I had to prove myself, and I don't know, I guess I did, because now I feel like I can walk into a room with anyone and just kind of stand shoulder to shoulder. It was a really fulfilling, I guess, endeavor for me to take. And yeah, I just loved everything about it. I still do.
So how'd you get pulled in on the national scene and get some of the opportunities that you had to go from a girl in Illinois to one of the best wrestlers in the country?
My parents were supportive in taking me to a lot of different tournaments. At the time, USGWA was big, so there were a couple national tournaments with that gave me some exposure. Fargo gave me some exposure. And I was invited to train at the U.S. Olympic Education Center in Northern Michigan. So for my junior year of high school, I ended up moving to Northern Michigan. And that was, I don't know, it was like the best of times and the worst of times. Mm-hmm. Winter 9 months out of the year, but also a lot of girls that I'm still great friends with ended up being on the team with me, and our careers kind of paralleled. But yeah, that was really interesting. So as a high schooler living in a college dorm, probably wouldn't recommend it if that was going to be another program to start. But for me, it was fun. And then from there, for my first year of college, myself, Helen Maroulis, Amy Whitbeck, Skylar Brown, we all followed Randy Miller to Missouri Baptist University for a year and trained under her. And that was, it wasn't exactly a new program, but it felt like a guinea pig program. And we really roughed it, and it was awesome, but we definitely roughed it. After that, I moved to the Olympic Training Center for 6 years. I would say that the athlete lifestyle when you're chasing a dream is kind of just, you take the opportunities that are presented and you go with it and you believe in it wholeheartedly. If you end up in a bad situation, bad coach, not that I had bad coaches, but just a situation that isn't fit for your career. Sometimes it's hard to make those changes because you feel like you're letting people down, but I wasn't really afraid to make changes. So I bounced around a lot in my career. The last training situation I ended up in was in North Carolina. I blew out my elbow really bad in the 2015 national championships, and then moved out there to stay with a friend. Ended up finding a coach and a wrestling facility that seemed suitable for me, good training partners. And so that was kind of my last go while I was competing. So I was training there. But yeah, it's been a ride.
A lot of people don't know you were a junior world silver medalist, right? Talk about that tournament, because I mean, man, that's a beautiful podium finish, and it's certainly you won a medal for your country there.
Yeah, that was great. I think that I was a huge underdog. Nobody knew who I was walking into it, and I bumped off the champ from the year previously, and in my finals match, her name was Hannah Johansson from Sweden, and I think it was like a 1-1 and then another 1-1 bout, or 1-0, 0-1, 1-1 bout. Anyways, it was a very close match. It was a really heartbreaking match that came down to criteria at the time, which was one person gets to choose a leg and the other person has to defend for 30 seconds.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I remember that part very clearly. But yeah, those moments in your career, it's hard to let go because it's always like, oh, what could have been? But it's, in the grand scheme of things, it was just an incredible experience and a lot of fun.
So 2013, pretty active year for you, right? Senior Worlds, University World Games. Talk about that year. I mean, obviously you worked so hard for so long, and you're out there battling the best, right?
Yeah. I think I caught stage fright in the World Championships that year. Something happened. I feel like I should have been a finalist, but I wasn't. I had the girl that took second place that year, I had beat multiple times, and it just wasn't my day. So that's okay, though.
So I think a lot about your wrestling, and my perception of you was aggressive, tough, great condition, great heart. I mean, what would you say was your strength on the mat?
I would definitely resonate with all those things. I was just so determined, and the work that I put in, the intensity that I was able to keep in the match, conditioning, all of those things are 100% within our control. Maybe we can't control our genetics, or maybe we can't control the technique we learned from our coaches, or what have you. But conditioning and heart, those are two things that that we always have control of as a competitor. And so to me, I definitely leaned very heavy on having control of those aspects and making sure that those aspects were always in peak condition, because I truthfully could never excuse myself if I let one of those things falter when I knew that it was a matter of my effort. So my effort was always 100% or more, if it could be.
Yeah, I kind of remember photos of you with some black eyes along the way, right? You'd get right into it, right? I mean, no problem, right?
I think people had fun watching me, but maybe didn't have fun wrestling me. So.
So off the mat, I mean, talk about what you studied when you're in college, the kind of things that you do, um, to pay the bills and to keep yourself inspired off of wrestling mat.
Sure. So my first job ever was the sponsorship opportunity with Dick's Sporting Goods. So I worked for Dick's Sporting Goods for 3 years. And then I worked for my uncle's coffee shop in San Diego and learned the ropes of making coffee and just had a little bit of an introduction of what it looks like to be on the administrative side of that. And then my fiance and I moved to Colorado 2 years ago, and now I manage a roastery here. So if anybody is looking for some delicious coffee, I got you covered. But yeah, so coffee's become a huge part of my life, which is, I think, in line with me. I'm a laid back person outside of wrestling. I like to enjoy the little things. I like to have my time where I just kind of sit and think about things. But yeah, so that's become interesting. I guess my vision for that moving forward, I'm kind of treating this as an education in itself, learning how to properly run a business, run employees, with intent to one day be able to run my own business. I'm actually still in school. I am going for my bachelor's in business administration with the concentration in small business management and entrepreneurship. I want to get my master's after. I've also entertained the potential for going to law school after. I think that being on the AAC and just realizing like everything that goes into it and kind of my strengths in that, I think that law is something that I could eventually go into and find interesting and fascinating and challenging for myself. But really, like, I don't have this set plan for my life like I did with wrestling. And that's actually been a really hard thing to adjust to, because wrestling's so structured, and there's this end goal that's always there that you can always look to give you a little bit of lift. And in the real world, I guess you got to find your Olympic gold in something else. And it's been a very serious adjustment for me. But I'm grateful for it. I've grown so much through it. And then I also realized that those attributes in wrestling that carried me so far, 110% all the time, intensity and just gritting through it, it doesn't always rub everyone the right way. So I've had to tone down my approach and, with normal people. It's just,
normal
it's so
people.
different.
Yeah,
It's fun, though.
we're unique. We're unique people, aren't we? We kind of have a different language and different way we look at things once in a while. That's custom. So you've told me you like doing some of the grappling, jiu-jitsu kind of stuff once in a while. Talk a little bit about, how that's kept you not only physically active, but something that has become part of what you do.
Yeah. So originally when I left wrestling, I had my sights set on MMA, and I thought that would be just the easiest transfer and something that fit me perfectly. But I experienced a lot of head trauma in my career and realized that maybe I should take things slow before getting punched in the head over and over. So I guess, but in training MMA, I found jiu-jitsu and really kind of fell in love with it. It still bothers me that I have to go to my back. It's something I still don't like doing, but it's cool. It's a different type of control. It's a lot less, I mean, you can make it as intense as you want to, but it's a lot less of a strain on my body than wrestling is. And it's definitely more technique focused, I believe, than wrestling is. Now, there's very nuanced technique in wrestling, but with jiu-jitsu, you have this leverage point where you have these really small people that can overtake huge people because it's not about overpowering and getting through the takedown. It's about isolating one joint and breaking that joint until they tap. And it's, so there's just a different aspect. I've definitely been humbled through it. And then I've also done my fair share of humbling people through it. I haven't competed in it, but it's something that I've just been dabbling in. Yeah, it's cool. I could see myself continuing to develop in it. I definitely do it for fun, even though I get a little bit excited about the possibility of competing. But for now, I'm just trying to rein back and make sure that everything that I do is in line with not getting caught up in the competition so much, because that's such a huge part of who I am. It's very easy for me to be overtaken by what the competition could look like and what the results could look like. So yeah, I think that sums it up.
So one last question. Heck, I could talk to you for hours.
I know, Gary. Like best friend.
Women's wrestling blowing up all over the country and world. I mean, obviously, we're up to 28 states now that have official wrestling opportunities for girls. The colleges are now 70 or 80 teams, 90. I don't know. The number just keeps growing, and you know, obviously, people around the country and world have figured out that wrestling is a legitimate opportunity for women of all ages to be an athlete. What are your thoughts about where we are now and how far we can go with that women's wrestling?
Where we are now blows my mind. I'm so happy for the growth, and a lot of it's organic, but a lot of it is led by pioneers of our sport like Sally Roberts and Wrestle Like a Girl. And I mean, where we can go, the potential is just, it's limitless. Wrestling can become a household name for everyone that has a daughter. It's just, I don't know. I see so many people reaching out to me, like with their daughters getting interested in it. And I see it as something that, I don't know, it's so great, Gary. Like, it's so vast. The opportunities are so much better than when my generation was coming up through it. Everything's kind of, it's becoming more professionalized with the presentation of it. And it's making people want to interact with wrestling or be a wrestler. Social media plays a huge part in it because it inspires people. They start scrolling and see, oh my gosh, girls can do this too. Oh my gosh, girls are winning this too. And it almost seems like as much as it's growing, it seems like the gender part is almost being taken out of it. It's like, soon it's not the growth of women's wrestling. Soon it'll just be this umbrella of wrestling where it's not really separated in that way. That's kind of how I see it going. I think that my generation and generations before me, it was very hard to be accepted in a boys tournament. There were no girls divisions on the local level. And now you see it all over the place, and it's just awesome. It's inspiring. It makes me want to like stay involved and give back.
I've enjoyed watching your career on the mat, but also being part of seeing your growth as a leader within wrestling. It's been a fun journey for me to help share with you. And I just appreciate your time and, you know, want to thank you for what you're doing for wrestling, Veronica.
Oh, thank you, Gary. I appreciate it.
Thank you.